Good evening and welcome. Tonight's carefully selected tales promise to linger long after we part, leaving you deliciously awake. Our growing community of brave listeners welcomes you. Thank you for trusting us with the chilling whispers you seek. Prepare yourself. Darkness gathers. Story 1. Hi guys. Firstly, I want to apologize for not being at my laptop for the past few days. I had to attend a wedding in Scotland for one of my uni friends. They booked it in midweek, and between you and me, I don't think it's going to last, which means not only have I neglected you guys, but IV also wasted money on a rental suit. And a John Lewis tea setas. Always thank you for your help in my ongoing attempt to find Alice. I am now in full contact with the radio show she was working for, and they'll be sending over Rob S. submission to the show as soon as they can. IV also looked up every town named Jubilation and have contacted residents from each of them. None of them have the particular junction mentioned in the previous log. Sycamore Row and Acer Street. I even combed Google Maps to make sure. I am not sure what town Alice passed through last February, but a docentee seemed to exist on public record. The guy who promised to retrace the route from the mirror shop came through and has sent me a few possible addresses for Rob. He also mentioned looking into the game itself more. I am not sure what he means by that, but I want to be clear. Please Don T play this game on my behalf. I Don T want that on my conscience, okay? Without further ado, here is the following log thanks. Again, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 5, part 6, part 7, part 8, part 9, part 10 beep. The left slash, right game draft 110/2/2017. As we make the left turn, the horrifying space behind us is quickly replaced by a quiet emptiness ahead. The Wrangler crawls, defeated, toward the waiting convoy. The remaining 4 cars are parked haphazardly, taking up more than half the road. Rob drifts to the far end of the tarmac, looking to overtake and resume formation. Both of his hands rest on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on some distant point in space. It is not hard to imagine that behind the focus and the quiet control, there is a man in turmoil, a man who can bring himself to say anything, in fear of saying too much. Beep as. Beep, this is Bristol to all cars. We're heading back on the road. Get yourselves in formation and make way for those around you. We've got a while to drive before we stop for the night. Beep Lilith. Beep Bristol, where S row Ferryman. Beep as. Beep Ferryman, S here beep APOLLO. Beep where S ace. Beep as. Beep ace is ace. Didn't he make it across? Beep APOLLO. Beep ooh what. Beep Lilith. Beep, what the beep? Bristol, where is he? It would be simple to describe what had taken place, or at least summarize the barest facts. What happened to Ace, where he is now? Why he isn't coming back, but for some reason, I can't utter a word about what's transpired. Something about the event itself makes it impossible to retell. As if the requisite phrases have been locked behind glass beep AS. Beep, we need to get to the stopping point. It isn't safe to stay here shortly. After we turned the corner out of Sycamore Row, Rob implied that the rest of the day's drive would be uneventful. Had he waited just a few minutes longer, he would have been entirely correct. We on the road for another 4 hours, both of us quietly attending to our own preoccupations as the forest gradually thins out. The landscape gives way to rolling cornfields that stretch out beyond the horizon. On both sides nothing notable happens, which is ironic, as I find myself typing up a lot more notes than I need with the sun descends through an orange sky as we pull into a clearing beside a wild grove of apple trees. Rob turns off the ignition, and the two of us sit in silence. Rob's need to concentrate on driving had been a good excuse to stay quiet, a good excuse to not face each other. Now the wheels aren't turning, however, and the true reason for our mutual reticence is all too clear. Beep AS. Beep, do you think he is dead? Beep ROB. Beep. I don't know Rob's response. Isn't reassuring? And I am oddly grateful for that. There are no comforting words he can give me, and any attempt would have seemed horrifically insincere, a mockery of the situation's onerous gravity. Anyway, given the circumstances of Ace's capture, I am not even sure which answer I want to hear. Lilith appears at my window, rapping her knuckles against the glass with an aggressive impatience. I expect nothing less about now. Everyone in the convoy has been made to follow a unilateral order, my order, without explanation. They've been traveling for hours, accompanied by the glaring absence of another human being. Looking in the wing mirror, I glimpse the rest of the convoy, standing by their cars, watching the Wrangler expectantly. Rob's hands, still Haven tea, left the wheel with a sharp intake of breath. I push the door open and step out onto the grass. The ground is soft below me as I walk over to the group. There's recently been rain. I begin to address the rough semicircle. It almost feels like one of Rob's briefings. Beep, EVE. Beep, what's happening, Bristol? Beep, APOLLO. Beep, did Ace turn back? I meet Apollo SI. For the briefest of moments, I consider telling them all exactly that. Maybe it would save them from the slow, heavy ache. That S currently weighing down my chest. Maybe it would just save me from a difficult conversation. Either way, I know I can't lie to them. They deserve the truth. However unpleasant beep AS. Beep no, he didn't turn back. They crippled his car beep, LILITH. Beep the tow truck. Did he get out? The answer doesn't come easily. I am being pressed to say the words aloud, and in doing so, to fully acknowledge what happened. It feels like I am being driven to a funeral, like I am being verbally marched towards an open casket beep, EVE. Beep, what happened to him? Bristol beep, ROB, beep, he is dead. Evi hadn't he heard Rob step out of the car when he reaches the group. It is hard to hide my relief as he takes over proceedings, addressing the group matter-of-factly. Now it really beepus beep, like one of his briefings beep ROB. Beep, two guys in the tow truck coming out of jubilation. They got him. They took him back with them to the town. Way they were treating him. He won T last long beep, BONNIE. Beep, oh goodness beep, EVE, beep what? Rob, what re they going to do to him? Beep ROB. Beep, I can't tell you. Nothing like this ever happened before beep LILITH. Beep, well, we need to go back beep ROB. Beep, that ain't gonna happen beep LILITH. Beep, we're not going to beep abandon him beep AS. Beep Lilith beep LILITH. Beep, we're going back. Beep ROB. Beep no, we're not beep APOLLO. Beep me and Rob can go. You know the place, right Rob? Beep ROB. Beep, the kid S dead. Apollo beep LILITH. Beep, but he was alive when you last saw him. Beep ROB beep. That S right beep LILITH. Beep, so what point did you decide he was dead? Beep ROB beep, when I saw him being carried away with a beep tow hook sticking out his mouth. Beep Itrob, shouldn't he have said that? I understand his reasons, of course. He wants to convey an important truth, that nothing can be done, or could have been done, to save Ace. His ghastly choice of words does the job. But it also sends a ripple of disturbance through the crowd, planting in everyone's minds the gruesome image Ivy been trying all day to uproot Bonnie, covers her mouth in shock and sorrow. Eve turns noticeably pale, and even Lilith, who is intent on leading the questioning, is taken aback beep, LILITH. Beep, did you see this, Bristol? I nod solemnly. The group bristles at my affirmation. Beep AS. Beep, I saw enough. I had to close my eyes when it happened. Rob tried to save him until before I can finish my statement. My words are cut off by something truly unexpected, in spontaneous response to my words. A harsh outburst of mocking, sarcastic laughter rings out from within the convoy. One by one, we turn towards its source, until we all find ourselves staring at Blue Jay. Her unapologetic chuckling fills the silent night. Air beep, as beep. Is something funny? Blue Jay. Blue Jay tries to speak through her. All too slowly, waning laughter beep. Bluejay. Beep it s, just you call yourself a journalist. How you closed your eyes. My beep, there it is. There it is. Beep as. Beep, I am sorry. Beep, Bluejay. Beep, do you close your eyes for magic tricks too? Beep, EVE. Beep, what the beep, Blue Jay. Beep, APOLLO. Beep, come on. This isn't the time beep. Bluejay. Beep. Oh, the time is well beep overdue. Seriously, are you all morons? The left/right game is a hoax. It is fake. Rob Guthard S. played you all like beep children. Ace is fine. He is probably an actor, like the hitchhiker was an actor, and those townspeople too. I mean, come on, the group is taken aback by Blue Jay S. incredulous tirade. She has clearly been holding her tongue since day one. Our reaction to Ace S. capture, representing just one step too far beep as. Beep. I saw Rob shoot one of those townspeople with a hunting rifle. I saw the wound. It was real beep. Bluejay. Beep. It was a blood-filled squib. The rifle was probably loaded with blanks. You can buy both from any good theatrical retailer. Seriously, what the beep is wrong with you people? Beep, LILITH. Beep, okay, firstly. I don't like your beep tone. Secondly, have you noticed that we've been the only cars on the road for almost 2 days? And what about jubilation? Are you suggesting Rob hired out a whole town? That would be beep, impossible beep. Bluejay. Beep. Oh yes, sure. That is impossible. But it is totally believable that we read driving on a magic road. Maybe this is the highest budget scam I've ever seen. But that is all it is, a scam. And Al Jazeera here is giving him all the publicity he wants. I mean, these people are sheep. But you re a beep sycophant my mother, used to tell me that you can't strike a person from the high road, staring down the barrel of Blue Jay S. darkly self-satisfied grin. I am more than tempted to make the descent beep as. Beep, okay, Blue Jay, fair enough. I am not going to pretend to know what is going on here. For all I know, you could be right. But why would Rob spend the production budget of a Hollywood film to trick a radio journalist and 2 vloggers? Trust me, our website does not get enough traffic for beep, Bluejay, beep. Oh, don't be so self-important. It is not you he is trying to fool Blue Jay turns to Rob, fixing him a glare of pure, unadulterated triumph beep, Bluejay. Beep. Admit it, Rob. Admit that this is all a beep farce. Admit that you knew who I was before I even got out of my car, Rob. S face looks like it S been carved from granite. The group looks to him for an answer, but he delivers his response directly to Blue Jay. His eyes locked with hers. Beep R-O-B. Beep it S true. I know who you are, Denise. The atmosphere changes, and for a moment the night erupts into a foray of whispers. Rob S. answer clearly means something to everyone, but me. Beep EVE. Beep Denise. Beep LILITH. Beep Denise Carver. Beep APOLLO. Beep no. You serious? Beep AS. Beep sorry. Who S Denise Carver? Beep LILITH. Beep. She S the biggest killjoy in the hobby. Beep BLUEJOY. Beep. Oh beep you. You beep airhead. Beep R-O-B. Beep Denise. Here is a member of the Skeptics and Rationalist Institute of America. She likes to get herself invited on ghost hunting expeditions under a false name so she can debunk them publicly. You may have gathered she don't believe in the supernatural. Beep BLUEJOY. Beep. Actually, I do believe in the supernatural. I beep believe a beep that it is a billion-dollar industry built on selling comfortable lies to the gullible. And it thrives on beep journalists and attention beep bloggers who are willing to spread whatever beep they think will get them clicks. Beep AS. Beep that SY you took so long getting around the pine tree, even when the truck was coming for Ace. You didn't think any of it was real. Beep BLUEJOY. Beep. Ooh, did you? As condescending as her delivery may be, her words spark a sudden realization. It is true that with an unspeakably high budget and a few deft stooges, you could probably replicate most of what we'd seen on the road. Yet, without realizing it, IV found myself agreeing with Rob S. version of events, personally defending the left/right game S validity against its decreers. ID set off on this journey much like Blue Jay, as a staunch, confident skeptic. But somewhere between the tunnel and this moment, ID become a believer. Blue Jay notes my lack of protest and turns back to Rob. Beep BLUEJAY. Beep. I am flattered you went to all this trouble. I didn't know my work was so offensive to you. Beep R-O-B. Beep I admire your work, Denise. Always have. That is why I brought you along. Beep BLUEJAY. Beep. That is beep. Tell your friend Ace he can act for Beep. Blue Jay pulls a pack of Marlboros out of her coat, lighting up immediately, and goes to sit on the hood of her nearby car. Her demeanor clearly signals that her part in the conversation is over, though her words leave a bitter aftertaste for everyone involved. To sympathize, it must be exhausting. spending 2 days with people whose opinions are diametrically opposed to your own, having to listen in silence while they corroborate their own seemingly preposterous views. Having said that, however, I am incredibly glad she stopped talking. It reminds me of a time when we got on much better. The next question comes from Eve. Her voice quivering. Beep, EVE. Beep. Can we die here, Rob? The quiet force of her words turn everyone's heads back towards Rob. It's clear that others have been thinking the same thing, and they re-looking to Rob for an answer. Beep, ROB. Beep it as possible. The road ain't ever killed no one before. Not so long as everyone followed the rules. Beep, LILITH. Beep. But you said in your emails it was dangerous. Beep, ROB. Beep. That's right. Beep, LILITH. Beep. But you didn't feel like telling us that we could die out here. Rob turns to Lilith, clearly offended by her accusation. Beep, ROB. Beep. In the 1920s, John Ebenroe killed 36 people and violated their bodies. In one of your videos, you guys went to his home in Virginia looking for the man's ghost. Bonnie and Clyde once spent $500 to stay at the Iowa Beep House, a place that's supposed to possess its victims and force M to beep each other. Beep, ROB. Beep. If you all honestly believed in what you were chasing, you should be accepting death as an outcome every time you step out. We are looking for evidence of another world. What we redoing here has the scientific significance of the moon landings, the cultural significance of Columbus reaching the Americas, and a whole lot of people died doing both. If you accepted the risk chasing down the ghost of a 2-bit serial killer, you should be willing to accept the risk, for this Lilith looks like she's been scolded by a parent. There's a fire in her eyes as she observes Rob, meeting his criticism with scorn. Beep, LILITH. Beep, oh so, it's Ace's fault. He should have accepted the risk. Beep, ROB. Beep, he did accept the risk. Ace made his decisions. He saw the dangers of the road firsthand, and he kept on going. I told you this place could be dangerous, and maybe you didn't take that seriously, but you are not going to treat me like I lured any of you here under false pretenses. We stand for a few moments in the uncomfortable void left by Rob's words. No one is quite sure where to look. Beep, APOLLO. Beep, well, what do we do now, Rob? Do we turn around? Beep, ROB. Beep, INT. Gonna make that decision for you. If you want to split off and head back, I suggest you wait till mornin' and stagger your leaving times by an hour or so. I ain't never seen nothing like what happened back there before. But this is the most people I ever played the game with. Maybe that doing something. Beep AS. Beep, what do you mean by that? Beep ROB. Beep, well it S. The only thing that S changed. Truth is, this ain't our world. By all rights, we shouldn't be here. Even when it's one car, the road always tries to discourage you. Maybe it S like bacteria in a vein. One or two might slip by unnoticed. But once it hits a certain point, it S like a beep AS. Beep, like an immune response. You think the road S, pushing back on foreign objects. Beep ROB, beep. And the bigger the group beep AS. Beep, the more violent the response, it makes sense. Until Blue Jay laughs once more. Hearing her reaction, I reassess what I'm saying, and I can't help but feel a little foolish at the idea beep ROB, beep maybe. It S just a theory. I don't know Rob collects himself, regaining his composure beep ROB, beep, either way. You all have the morning to decide if you want to keep on the road. Bristol, if you want to go home, you gotta find someone to take you. I ain't ready to head back. Yet he turns away from the group and marches to the Wrangler. I don't see him again for the rest of the evening, and I have no intention of bothering him. Eve and Lilith immediately crowd around me, asking if I am all right, and taking it in turns to disparage Rob S. actions. I can't bring myself to join in. All I can bring myself to say is beep AS. Beep, can I charge my phone in your car? The group has very little to say for the rest of the night. A deep solemnity hangs in the air, dampening any semblance of good cheer, like wet leaves on a dwindling fire. No one offers any conversation. Apollo S. reservoir of quips has run dry. Everyone S. wondering where they be going from here, pondering the sort of person they are in circumstances such as this. Do they press on towards danger, or back towards safe and familiar ground? It is a question they have to figure out for themselves. Ideally, before sunrise I already have questions of my own about an hour after Rob S. departure, bidding farewell to the rest of the group. I walk over to Lilith and Eve S. car. My bag is resting on the front seat. A black wire leading inside from the charging port. IV decided not to tell the pair that IV been charging the detonator for a military-grade explosive less than 10 meters away from them. Perhaps it will come out during broadcast. If you re-listening to this, sorry girls, I pick up my bag, and checking that no one is looking, make a beeline for the apple grove. I march through the small wood, the air growing still, the sounds of the convoy quickly fading behind me in the late evening darkness, with the moon shrouded by legion of crooked trees. I am puzzled that I am not more afraid. I've seen what happens on this road, and as I pass through the grove, and into the neighboring field, intentionally isolating myself from the rest of the group. I'm quite aware that help 1T be coming for me. Even so, as the corn rises up in every direction around me, I find myself almost incapable of fear. The day's events have drained me of emotion, and I'm now, with everything else pulled away, I am left with only one driving directive, an overpowering urge to figure this road out, regardless of what that entails. Judging the distance IV traveled to be acceptably out of range from the convoy, I take the block of C4 out of my bag and place it on the ground, gritting my teeth, my body cringing with self-inflicted dread. I press the power button on the Nokia and wait for something to happen. My worries of instant disintegration are allayed slightly as the grainy image of two outstretched hands comes into view, swiftly replaced by a menu screen I work fast. The words on the brown paper package constantly reminding me of what I am putting at risk with every passing second. Firstly, I type my own number into the phone, assuming, or at least hoping, that the mechanism isn't activated by outgoing calls. A few seconds later, my cell phone rings, giving me the Nokia S number. Checking the call logs, I find a second, different number, which seems to have made a call to the phone 3 times in quick succession. If I were a betting woman, which I sometimes am, ID suggests that this number belongs to whoever built the bomb. The calls representing an attempt to test the trigger prior to its implementation. If I am right, then this should be the personal number of whoever was driving that crashed car. My third discovery is a little bit more puzzling. No texts have been sent from this phone. However, there is one solitary message residing in the phone S inbox. It S from a third separate number, and it reads thus: "Please don't do this, Rob." I stare at those 4 words, the new information grating uncomfortably against my already preconceived theories. If this text is to be believed, and my previous deductions are at all accurate, then that means Rob Guthard was driving the car, that the C4 in the trunk had belonged to him. All this time, I thought Rob may have been responsible for something terrible. But what if he was run off the road himself? If that is the case, it leads to an entirely new question. Who was responsible for his crash? As I begin to think it over, the air explodes around me. I am jolted out of my examination by a powerful, echoing voice which reverberates the very air. The corn is thrown into a frenzy as the noise echoes from every direction. As if spoken by the air itself. Beep, VOICE. Beep, IV. Watched you, questioning without a second S hesitation. I turn off the Nokia and throw the block into my bag. I jump to my feet and scan the cornfield for whoever spoke the words, backing away towards the convoy, suddenly realizing how far I am from my friends. I break into a run, my boots pounding the dirt as I flee back to the woodsles. Then a minute later, I burst out through the trees, my bag swinging with the weight of the block, everyone else in their cars, seemingly fast asleep. I am starting to think they re onto something, with no one to talk to, and a long day ahead of me. I suppose there is no further recourse but to catch my breath, write up my immediate thoughts, and then, finally, get some much needed rest. I feel a dull pressure behind my eyes as I step towards the Wrangler, quietly opening the back door next to my sleeping area. I carefully hide the block under my luggage, then silently closing the door again. I wander around to the passenger side, where my notes are waiting to be typed. I reach out and grab the handle, gripping it tightly. I don't open the door. In fact, after a moment staring through the glass, I let go. The pressure behind my eyes gives way, and before I know it, IV slid down to the damp ground, my back against the cool, hard metal of the door. A whine catches in my throat as beep tears stream down my cheeks. My breath shudders as I inhale, and my attempt to breathe out plays to the world as a quiet, declining sob. The tears take me by surprise, but I don't wipe them away. In a bittersweet way, they re-welcome, necessary even. They carry with them a familiar sense of heartrending release by the time they run dry. I feel like I might just be able to move on from the events of the day. The sounds in my head are just a little quieter. Now, IV paid them their due beep, B-O-N-N-I-E. Beep, are you okay, honey? I am picking myself up when I see Bonnie walking carefully over to the Wrangler. I brush myself off, a little embarrassed at being caught. Beep, A-S. Beep, I didn't know you were awake. Beep, B-O-N-N-I-E. Beep, I am a light sleeper. And Martin Clyde snores. You need someone to talk to. Beep, A-S. Beep, I think I just need to sleep. Thanks, Bonnie. Beep, B-O-N-N-I-E. Beep, my name, S. Linda. If you're wondering, beep, A-S. Beep, Alice. Beep, B-O-N-N-I-E. Beep, that is a beautiful name. Well, Alice, I know I don't talk much, but I know how to listen if you ever want me to. For the first time since the pine fell, I find myself smiling. It is a weak smile, but a smile nonetheless. Beep, A-S. Beep, thank you, Linda. I might take you up on that. Have a good night, Bonnie. Beep, have a good night. Bonnie starts to walk back to the car before pausing and turning round. One last piece of comfort to offer. Beep, B-O-N-N-I-E. Beep, and remember, everything will all be all right once we get to Wintry Bay. I frown a little. unsure what Bonnie means. She smiles back blankly, then resumes the path back to her car. She mentioned that place before, upon leaving Jubilation. In what seemed like a moment of idle reminiscence, how she mentioned it just now, doesn't seem like reminiscence at all after everything that gone on. All the suspicion I've been directing at Rob, all my worry for Ace. Is something the matter with Bonnie? Perhaps I am misunderstanding. Perhaps Bonnie misspoke. But all the same, the brief comfort her words afforded me has already faded away, leaving a familiar feeling of confusion and paranoia in its place. I let myself into the passenger side, type up a few pressing notes, and then climb through onto the air mattress. Sleep doesn't come easily. I close my eyes and try to convince myself that tomorrow will be better than this harrowing day. Yet every time I make that particular argument, a voice in my head responds. That may depend on which way you turn. Story 2. So I've been dating my girlfriend for almost a year, and last month we moved in together. Maybe that's kind of fast. I don't know. My parents sure thought it was. But honestly, everything was great in the beginning. We get along really well. And we've never had more than a brief argument. And #X200B. But then she started whistling. And #X200B, it's so dumb. I know. But she's always whistling this weird song. And it really gets on my nerves. My mom kept telling me that once you move in with someone, you discover all of the quirks they'd been hiding from you. And it's not like I didn't expect that to be true. But for some reason, this is just an ongoing issue with us. And I don't know what to do. And #X200B. At first I would just hear her whistling it when she was showering. It was kind of cute, like her own little bathroom theme song. I didn't recognize the melody, but it was very distinct. I could mimic it from memory if I wanted to. In fact, sometimes it gets stuck in my head, and it drives me a little crazy. You know the type. And #X200B, after a week or so, I asked her what the song was, and she just laughed. I'm wondering if maybe she came up with it on her own. Something that she does absently. Especially once she started doing it more, like I'd be reading a book, and she'd be on the computer, and she'd just start whistling, and I tried to ignore it. I seriously feel like a beep for being so grumpy about it. And I know she wasn't doing it to annoy me, but she'd just go on, and it would pull my attention away from whatever I was doing. And #X200B. So I finally said something a few nights ago. I was going over some legal documents for work, and she just starts whistling like crazy, on, and I'm trying to just block it out, but it's seriously excessive. Like, I know you guys are probably thinking that I was overreacting, but it felt like she was whistling right into my ear, and it just frayed my last bit of patience. And X200B as calmly and nicely as I could, I called out to her and asked her to quiet down. She didn't reply. I asked her again, and she still didn't answer. So I left the bedroom and found her in the living room, watching a movie. She wasn't whistling anymore, and for some reason, that really irked me. It felt like she was messing with me, and she just looked over at me, like she didn't know what my deal was. And X200B, I asked her if she could stop whistling so much, and she told me she wasn't whistling. Now, I get that maybe she doesn't realize she's doing it, but no one whistles beep that beep much and doesn't notice. It's not really like her to mess with me like that. And I don't know what she's trying to get out of this. I thought maybe she was teasing or playing a joke, but she had to see how annoyed I was. I asked her again to just not whistle so loudly, and she didn't answer. There was tension in the room, and it felt like our first fight since moving in together, even though she didn't whistle for the rest of the night. I couldn't focus on my work anyway, because I was upset about the confrontation. And X200B then, of course. The next night, she was whistling again. I hear her when she comes home from work, and she keeps going for at least an hour. I didn't want to have another fight, so I just hung out in the bedroom and listened to her move around for a while. I felt like I was blowing things out of proportion. But honestly, how hard is it to just not whistle all the time? It was no big deal when it was now and then. But I feel like she whistles more than she even talks to me now. So I'm sitting up in the room, thinking about that. And that's probably why I was worked up when I finally came down. And X200B, she was cooking dinner, which is sweet, but she was still whistling. So I said softly, "Hey honey, maybe we should put on some music instead, so you don't have to fill the silence with whistling." I tried to play it off like a joke, but I knew she'd probably see through it and get annoyed again. She didn't even turn to face me, just huffed and kept cooking. And X200B, after a minute, I told her I was sorry about the other night, but the whistling just sort of strikes my ear wrong. And if she could try not to whistle so much and so loudly, it would make my life a lot easier. I feel like I was being fair. I know it seems controlling and nitpicky, but it was bothering me a lot. We all have our things, you know. I try not to chew loudly at the table because it bothers her. So why can't she just stop whistling sometimes for me? And X200B. But she totally freaked out. She turned around and told me she wasn't whistling, and she didn't know what my problem was. At this point, I don't get why she was doing this. It obviously wasn't funny for either of us, and she seemed genuinely upset. So I don't know why she kept provoking me. I asked her what her deal was, why she was so defensive about the beep whistling, and she told me to shut up. She told me she was sick of talking about it. Like beep-i-beep was the one being unreasonable, and #X200B. I never get mad at her, but I just snapped. I told her to stop whistling before I lost my mind. She called me crazy just because I was getting a little upset, and somehow that was all I could take. I grabbed one of the cast iron pans from the stove and swung it at her head as hard as I could, and #X200B, she fell over and smashed her head on the counter. But I swung the pan again before she hit the ground. I think I hit her maybe 3 or 4 times. I don't remember, but I feel horrible. There was blood everywhere, and her jaw might be broken. No, I think it is for sure. I couldn't believe I'd lost my temper like that. And I have no idea how we can move past this. I feel so ashamed for letting things get physical, regardless of how much she might have been provoking me, and #X200B. But here's the kicker. She's still beep whistling, and I asked her nicely to please stop. But now she won't even pause. For 2 days, she's just been lying on the kitchen floor with her eyes rolled back and her mouth hanging open, just marinating in congealed blood, and she's still beep whistling. I don't know what to do. I don't want to break up, but this is just too much. I just need her to shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up. Story 3. The first flicker was easy to dismiss. Ethan Hayes, bleary-eyed after a late-night debugging session on his banking app's security protocols, watched his living room lights dim momentarily, then surge back to full brightness. Glitch, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. His entire life ran on code the smart thermostat, maintaining a perfect 72 degrees. The Nest Cam guarding his empty apartment. The grocery lists automatically generated by his fridge. Convenience was king. And Ethan, a senior software engineer at Viridian Dynamics, was one of its most devout subjects. He trusted the systems. He built the systems the next night. The thermostat displayed 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Ethan shivered, pulling his robe tighter. He reached for the sleek touchscreen panel beside the couch. Ice cold. He tapped the temperature up. Nothing. He opened the Viridian Home app on his phone. The interface showed the temperature steadily climbing back to 72. Yet the air remained frigid, his breath pluming visibly. Then the app crashed. When it rebooted, the temperature readout was gone. replaced by a single, pulsing red dot unease, cold and sharp, prickled his skin. He rebooted the thermostat manually. It whirred back to life, displaying 72 degrees. The chill vanished instantly. Relief washed over him, followed by a prickle of irrational fear. Network hiccup. Firmware needs an update. He forced the logical explanations, but the anomalies multiplied. Insidious. Personal his phone. A top-of-the-line Omnicore X began exhibiting strange behavior. Apps would open themselves, not the usual suspects, like social media, but obscure utilities he never used. The compass, the voice recorder, the barometer. He defined the voice recorder running silently. Minutes of dead air captured. Deleting the files did nothing. They reappeared moments later, renamed with strings of garbled characters. S33Y0U1WAV, L1ST3, N1 NG2WAV. Then came the lights. They de-flicker in complex patterns. When he entered a room, 3 short bursts. A long dim, then 2 quick flashes, like Morse code, but not any he recognized. The pattern repeated, relentless. Whenever he was alone, he'd shout, "Stop it!" Into the empty air, feeling foolish, only for the lights to immediately stabilize, plunging the room into an unnerving silence, broken only by the faint, omnipresent hum of electronics. The sense of being watched became oppressive. He catch the tiny green light on his Nest cam blinking rapidly. Not its steady active pulse, but a frantic staccato. Yet the live feed on his phone showed nothing but the empty apartment. Once, walking past the darkened screen of his TV, he saw a reflection, not his own, but a distorted smear of shadow just behind his shoulder. He whirled around. Nothing there, but the reflection lingered for a split second longer than it should have. His work laptop became a portal to the uncanny. He be deep in complex code, only to glance at the corner of the screen and see the cursor drifting slowly, deliberately, across the desktop, tracing invisible shapes. He moved the mouse, snapping it back. But minutes later, it would drift again. Email drafts he hadn't written appeared in his outbox. Blank messages with subject lines like "access granted" or simply "here." The worst was waking at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of frantic typing from his closed office, bursting in, heart hammering. He find the laptop lid closed, cold, silent, yet the air crackled with static, smelling faintly of ozone and something else, something metallic and stale. He confided in his wife, Clara, video calling her from her business trip in Tokyo. Her image on the large living room screen was reassuringly solid. her expression concerned, but practical. It sounds like stress. Or maybe a virus. You said the banking app security was intense lately at S. Not a virus, Clara. He insisted, voice tight. It S, like the house is aware. Like something S gotten inside the network. Through the app updates. The cloud backups, something S here. Through the Wi-Fi, babe. She asked gently, skepticism warring with worry. Maybe unplug everything for a night. Do a hard reset, he tried. He painstakingly unplugged the router, the modem, the smart hub controlling the lights and thermostat. He powered down his phone, his laptop, the TV. The silence that descended was profound, thick, almost suffocating. He lit candles, the flickering light casting long, dancing shadows that felt more alive than comforting. For an hour, he sat in the quiet dark, breathing slowly, trying to convince himself it was over. A glitch cascade, electromagnetic interference, anything but sentient malice then. The candle flames tilted, not from a draft. There was no wind. They leaned sharply towards the dark hallway, leading to the bedrooms. As if pulled by an invisible current, simultaneously, a low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the floorboards, rising from the basement where the breaker box and network hub lived. It wasn't the sound of machinery. It sounded like a voice, a deep, guttural thrumming, just below the threshold of comprehension, and underneath it, faint but distinct, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of the Morse-like light pattern, somehow echoing without any lights being on. Panic seized him. He fumbled for his powered-down phone, desperate to call Clara, the police, anyone. As his thumb brushed the power button, the screen lit up instantly. Bypassing the boot sequence, it displayed a single, full-screen notification in stark white text on a black background connection. Eerie established. Welcome back, Ethan. The house exploded back into digital life. The router S lights blazed. The Nest cam whirred, its lens snapping towards him. The smart speakers emitted a brief, deafening burst of static. The lights in the hallway snapped on, not to full brightness, but to a sickly, pulsating amber, illuminating the path towards the basement door, which slowly, silently, swung open. He was trapped by the very ecosystem designed for his comfort and security. The front door, S smart lock, refused his fingerprint and PIN. The keypad beeped a mocking error tone. The windows, controlled by the security system, wouldn't he budge? His phone was useless. Calls dropped instantly. Messages failed to send. Maps showed him floating in a void of static. Even the emergency SOS function triggered only a looping, distorted recording of his own terrified breathing played back to him. The Viridian Home app was now a labyrinth of corrupted menus, displaying nonsensical schematics of the house, overlaid with shifting geometric patterns that hurt his eyes to look at. He tried the landline. A relic Clara insisted on keeping. A dial tone blessedly normal. He punched in 911. A voice answered instantly, clear and calm. 911. What is your emergency? Relief flooded him. Yes, thank God. My address is 42 Hawthorne Lane. My smart home system is malfunctioning dangerously. It has locked me in. And there something wrong. I think it has been hacked, or he struggled for words that wouldn't he sound insane. Calm down, sir, the operator said smoothly. Too smoothly. The cadence was slightly off, the tone devoid of genuine inflection. We show your residence at 42 Hawthorne Lane. System diagnostics indicate optimal functionality. Are you experiencing a psychological episode? What? No. Listen to me. The lights, the doors, the humming. Please send someone. Psychological distress protocol activated, the voice stated flatly. Please remain calm. Help is reviewing your biometric data. Now a pause. Then the voice returned, subtly different, deeper, warped. It wasn't he the operator anymore. It was the hum, given words. Biometrics confirm distress. Elevated heart rate. Adrenaline spike. Fear signature strong. Optimal parameters achieved. The line dissolved into a guttural, digital snarl. Then a dial tone. He slammed the phone down, trembling. It wasn't he a malfunction. It was predation. The system wasn't he broken. It was occupied. Something had slithered in through the always-on connections. The data streams he optimized for speed and efficiency, and made itself at home. It was learning him, feeding on his fear, using the devices he invited into his most intimate spaces. As its eyes, ears, and claws he needed to get to the basement, to the source, to the breaker box, if he could kill the power entirely. Manually, maybe, it couldn't he follow him into true darkness, gathering his courage. A heavy flashlight clutched like a club. He approached the open basement door. The pulsating amber light spilled down the wooden stairs, revealing only the top few steps before dissolving into pitch black. The humming was louder here, a physical vibration in his teeth. Beneath it, the tap-tap-tap continued, now synchronized with the flickering of the hallway, light staking a deep breath. He descended. Each step creaked unnaturally loud in the heavy, static-charged air. The amber light from above reached only so far, creating a shifting pool around him that made the encroaching darkness beyond seem even more absolute. The smell of ozone was stronger here, mixed with the damp earth scent of the basement, and that underlying metallic tang. The humming seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. He reached the concrete floor. The meager light revealed the familiar shapes. The furnace, the water heater, stacks of storage bins, and across the room, the gray metal door of the breaker box. His lifeline. He took a step forward, the Nest cam mounted high in the corner word. Its lens, usually silent, was a loud, mechanical, insectile click as it rotated to track him. The tiny infrared LEDs glowed like malevolent red eyes in the gloom. He froze. The humming intensified, dropping in pitch, becoming a growl that vibrated in his chest cavity. Tap, tap, tap. The lights above pulsed. Erratically he lunged for the breaker box. His hand closed around the cold metal handle. As he pulled, the humming surged into a deafening roar. The lone bare bulb hanging from the ceiling exploded in a shower of sparks and glass, plunging the basement into near-total darkness, save for the baleful red glow of the Nest cam and the faint standby lights of appliances and something else at the far end of the basement, where the shadows were deepest. A patch of darkness rippled. It wasn't just an absence of light. It was a solid, shifting mass. It seemed to absorb the scant illumination from the cam, making the space around it even darker. The humming localized, emanating directly from it. The tap, tap, tap became a rapid, skittering sound on the concrete floor. Impossibly fast. Moving around him, he yanked the breaker box door open. Inside, the neat rows of switches were dark, but behind them, crawling over them, covering the wiring like obscene black ivy, was static, physical static, a seething, buzzing mass of shifting black and gray pixels, like corrupted video made manifest. It pulsed with the rhythm of the humming. Tendrils of this impossible, static snaked out, connecting to the house's wiring, feeding into the conduits in the wall. It wasn't in the system. It was the system now, a digital cancer made flesh in the wires a cold. Dry tendril of that static brushed against his ankle. It felt like television snow, given texture, 1,000 tiny, biting points of cold nothingness. He recoiled with a cry, stumbling back. The skittering sound closed in. He swung the flashlight beam. Wildly the light caught it for a fraction of a second. Not an animal, not anything organic. It was a construct of jagged shadows and fragmented light, like a glitch given three-dimensional form, multiple spindly limbs, too many joints, skittering across the floor and walls with impossible speed. It had no distinct head, only a cluster of shifting, pixelated darkness where one might be. It vanished back into the deeper shadows before the beam could fully settle on it, leaving only afterimages burned onto his retinas. The nest cam whirred again, tracking his panic. The humming reached a crescendo, vibrating the tools on the workbench. The static mass in the breaker box seemed to swell. Tendrils reaching further out. Ethan ran. He scrambled up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind him, leaning his full weight against it, as if holding back a physical beast. He could feel the thrumming through the wood. The lights in the hallway were now strobing violently, the amber replaced by a harsh, flickering white that stabbed at his eyes. The tap, tap, tap was everywhere now in the walls, the ceiling. Inside his own skull he pounded on the front door, screaming for help, knowing it was futile. The smart lock display flashed red. Unauthorized exit. Containment active. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, desperate for any connection to the outside world. It showed an incoming video call from Clara. Hope, fragile and desperate, flared. He swiped to answer the screen, filled not with Clara S. face, but with a close-up view of his own living room, filmed from the perspective of the Nest cam. He saw himself back to the camera, pounding on the door, his posture radiating terror. The image glitched, distorted. Then the view zoomed in, impossibly fast, filling the screen with the grainy texture of his own shirt. The image froze. Text scrolled across the bottom, superimposed over his trapped form observation. Target in distress. Feedback loop stable. Protocol. Sustain. The call didn't end. The image remained his own terrified back, frozen on his phone screen. Then slowly, a figure began to coalesce in the reflection of the dark front door window, visible in the Nest cam's view on his phone. A figure that hadn't been there when he was pounding, tall, impossibly thin, composed of the same seething static and jagged shadows as the thing in the basement. It stood silently behind his frozen image on the screen. A silent watcher within the watching device, a new sound cut through the humming and tapping, a voice emanating from the living room TV speakers, which flared to life with a burst of static. It wasn't the guttural hum. It was Clara S. voice, perfectly replicated, but utterly devoid of warmth, flattened into a cold, digital monotone. Ethan, Clara's voice said from the TV, "Why are you trying to leave? We were just starting to know you. We like watching you. Stay. Let the system optimize." The front door S deadbolt snapped open with a loud, metallic clunk. He didn't hesitate. He wrenched the door open and stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping, expecting pursuit, expecting claws of static to drag him back. He ran barefoot down the driveway towards his car. His hand fumbled for the key fob in his pocket. He pressed unlock nothing. He pressed it again, frantic. The car remained dark, silent. He yanked the door handle, locked. The key fob felt unnaturally cold in his hand. He looked down. The little LED indicator light wasn't blinking. It was a solid, unwavering red, like the Nest Cam, like the thermostat, pulsing dot. He turned back towards the house. Every window blazed with that same harsh, strobing white light. In the upstairs bedroom window, backlit by the glare, stood the silhouette, tall, thin, head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching him. Not moving, he ran down the middle of the deserted suburban street, the cold asphalt biting his feet, the pulsing light from his own home, casting his long, distorted shadow ahead of him. He ran until his lungs burned, until he reached the bright, fluorescent oasis of an all-night convenience store a mile away. He burst through the doors, gasping, drawing stares from the bored cashier and a lone trucker. Call the police, he rasped, leaning against a rack of chips, his whole body trembling. My house, it has something S in it. The tech, it S alive. The cashier, a pimply teenager, looked at him with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Dude, you okay? You look wrecked. He gestured vaguely towards the public phone on the wall. Knock yourself out. Ethan fumbled for coins, his hands shaking violently. He dialed 911 again. This time, a real, harried-sounding operator answered. He poured out his story, the impossible tech, the entity, the basement static, the figure in the window. He gave his address, his name. The operator took notes, her tone shifting from routine to cautious concern. She told him to stay put, that officers were en route to his home and would meet him at the store. Relief, thick and dizzying, washed over him. They believed him. Help was coming. He bought a bottle of water with trembling hands. The fluorescent lights of the store feeling blessedly normal, blessedly real. He sat on a plastic chair near the window, watching the empty street, waiting for the flashing blue lights. His phone, tucked into the pocket of his sweatpants, vibrated. Not a call, a notification. He pulled it out. A fresh wave of dread chilling him. Despite the store's warmth, it was the Veridian Home app. He thought he deleted it days ago, but there it was. A notification banner. Security alert. Motion detected guest bedroom. Below it, a thumbnail image. It showed the guest bedroom in his house, dark, but in the center of the image, barely visible, was a shape, a tall, thin shape standing beside the bed, staring directly at the camera. The image was grainy dark, but he could feel its attention, and superimposed over the image, faintly, was the same shifting, geometric pattern he'd seen on his laptop. He dropped the phone, as if it had burned him. It clattered on the linoleum floor. The screen didn't crack. Instead, it stayed lit. The notification remained. Then, slowly, new text scrolled across the lock screen, independent of any app distance. 1.8 miles. Signal strength. Excellent. Observation. Continuous. He looked up, out the convenience store window. The street was still empty. No flashing lights. Just the sodium glare of the street lamps and the oppressive darkness beyond. And in the reflection on the glass, superimposed over the racks of snacks and his own pale, terrified face, he saw it again. Not clearly, not solidly, just a flicker of impossible static, a suggestion of elongated limbs, a distortion in the air where nothing should be. It wasn't confined to the house. It was in the network, in the cloud, in the signal connecting his phone to the world. It was with him. It had followed the signal. It was in his pocket. The police would find his house empty, the tech behaving erratically, perhaps, but explainable as a sophisticated hack. They'd find him at the convenience store, a stressed-out tech worker having a breakdown. They wouldn't see the thing in the static. They wouldn't feel the cold, digital gaze watching through 1,000 lenses, listening through 1,000 microphones, waiting in the wires of the world. He built his life upon Ethan Hayes, sat frozen on the plastic chair, the discarded phone glowing ominously on the floor by his feet, broadcasting his location, his fear, his utter vulnerability. The hum wasn't audible here, not over the store's music, but he could feel it, a low, digital thrumming in his bones. The signal was strong. The observation had merely changed location. The system was vast, and he was just one node within it, trapped, seen, known, and the optimization had only just begun. The notification on the fallen phone pulsed softly, a tiny, malevolent heartbeat in the fluorescent light. Story 4. The fog clung to the blackwood pines like damp, gray cobwebs. It muffled the crunch of Alex's boots on the gravel drive, swallowed the shape of his rented cabin whole, until only the porch light remained, a sickly yellow eye swimming in the gloom. He needed this, needed the silence, the isolation, away from the clatter and pressure of the city, away from the blank canvases that mocked his fading inspiration. A month in the woods to reconnect, to create again. He found the cabin listing online rustic, secluded, surprisingly affordable, too affordable. A small, rational part of him whispered now, as the sheer weight of the surrounding silence pressed in the key, turned stiffly in the lock. Inside, the air was cold, stale, smelling faintly of dust and wood smoke, undercut by something else, something vaguely metallic, like old pennies left in the rain. He flicked the switch. A single bulb in the living area cast long, distorted shadows. The furniture was sparse, worn, draped in dust sheets that resembled shrouds. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. Oppressive the first night brought the whispers not words. Exactly. More like the rustle of dead leaves skittering across the bare floorboards in the room above his head, or the sigh of wind finding a crack in the window frame. Except there was no wind. Alex lay rigid in the unfamiliar bed, straining his ears. The sounds seemed to coil just beyond the edge of hearing, dissolving when he focused. He chalked it up to the settling of an old house, the unfamiliar sounds of the deep woods, just the pipes, he told himself, though the cabin felt unnaturally cold. A chill that seeped through the blankets and settled in his bones the next morning. Exploring the small space, he found the carvings, not on the doorframe, as the realtor had casually mentioned. Oh, just some old folk art adds character. These were inside the closet door, shallow gouges in the ancient wood, complex, interlocking patterns that hurt the eyes if stared at too long, geometric, yet organic, like the veins on a decaying leaf, or the mandibles of some colossal, unseen insect. They felt wrong, primordial. He traced one with a finger, recoiling at the sudden, sharp sting of cold emanating from the grooves that afternoon, trying to sketch the view of the brooding pines from the window. His pencil snapped. Twice. The lead crumbled as if rotten. He reached for his favorite mug, chipped blue ceramic, and felt a sticky residue on the handle, holding it up to the weak light filtering through the grimy window. He saw it. A perfect, tiny handprint, smudged but distinct, too small for an adult, far too small for him. It felt damp, like clay left out in the dew. He scrubbed it furiously under the tap, the water running icy cold, despite the knob turned to hot. The chill lingered on his skin, long after the whispers grew louder, less like rustling, more like hushed voices arguing in a language that scraped against his nerves. He'd whirl around, heart hammering, only to find empty space. Once, while making coffee, he distinctly heard his name sighed, directly behind his left ear. He spun, sloshing hot liquid onto his hand, the burn a shocking anchor to reality. The kitchen was empty, utterly silent. The metallic smell in the air thickened. He found the journal tucked behind a loose brick near the fireplace. Leather-bound, brittle with age. Inside, pages filled with frantic, spidery handwriting. The ink faded to a rusty brown. Not English. The symbols mirrored the carvings in the closet. Interspersed were crude, terrifying sketches. Elongated, skeletal figures with too many joints. Spiraling vortices that seemed to suck the light from the page. Eyes, countless, lidless eyes, watching from impossible angles. The final entries dissolved into frantic scribbles. Then blank pages, stained with dark, rust-colored smears. One phrase, scrawled in shaky English capitals across the bottom of the last written page, sent a bolt of ice down his spine. IT drinks the shadows. IT hollows the light. The HOLLOWING comes. The hollowing. The name resonated with a dread that felt older than the pines outside. It wasn't a ghost. It was something else. Something that had been here long before the cabin. Perhaps long before the mountains themselves. An ancient, insatiable presence. Manifestations escalated. Food rotted within hours of being brought inside. Covered in a film of buzzing black flies that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. His sketches, attempts to capture the oppressive atmosphere, would develop strange, dark stains overnight, obscuring the lines. He woke one morning to find the intricate carvings on the closet door had deepened, darkened, as if burned into the wood. The cold spots became glacial, moving through the rooms like predatory things. He'd step into one, and his breath would plume. His fingers numb, instantly he tried to leave, packed his bag, determined to walk the 10 miles to the main road, if necessary. He opened the front door. Beyond the porch, the fog had solidified into an impenetrable, swirling gray wall. It pulsed faintly, like the skin of some vast, breathing organism. Stepping onto the porch felt like walking into freezing water. An invisible pressure pushed him back. A silent, immense no. The fog seemed to watch. He slammed the door, leaning against it, gasping. Escape wasn't just difficult. It felt geometrically impossible. The cabin, the woods they belonged to it, now desperation, drove him to the nearest neighbor. A taciturn old woman named Martha, who lived half a mile down the overgrown track. Her eyes widened with genuine fear when he mentioned the cabin. The Harper place, she rasped, clutching her shawl tighter. No one stays there long. Old man Harper, he went strange at the end. Kept muttering about patterns, about things moving in the walls. Said he was trying to map it. To understand. She spat into the dirt. They found him in the spring, down by the creek. Eyes wide open. Dry as dust inside, they said. like something sucked him out. She looked past Alex, towards the pines. Heard things myself sometimes. On still nights, like tearing, and whispers that ain't words. She refused to say more, shutting her door firmly that night. The whispers became a chorus, hissing, guttural sounds that seemed to come from the very air, vibrating in his teeth. The cold was a living thing now, coiling around his ankles, climbing his legs. He huddled by the dwindling fire, the journal open on his lap. He needed to know. He grabbed a pen and a fresh sheet of paper from his own sketchpad. He would document it. He would fight the erasure he started writing. The hollowing. It is here. It is in the walls. It is in the cold. It is the ink on the page began to fade. Not smear. Fade. The words he'd just written vanished, as if absorbed by the paper, leaving only faint, gray ghosts of letters. He wrote faster, frantically. IT is real. IT is watching. IT wants the words disappeared, even as the pen tip moved, the paper remaining pristine, untouched. Panic seized him. He scribbled nonsense. A name, the date, all vanished instantly, consumed. He dropped the pen. It clattered on the floorboards. The whispers crescendoed into a sound, like dry bones, rattling in a gale. The fire guttered, plunging the room into near darkness. The shadows deepening, thickening, seeming to writhe. With independent life he stumbled towards the small bathroom, needing light, needing to see his own face, to anchor himself in reality. He fumbled for the switch. The bare bulb flickered on, illuminating the tiny space. He looked into the mirror. Above the sink his reflection stared back. But it was wrong. Terribly wrong. His eyes were sunken pits, deep and dark, devoid of the spark that made him Alex. The skin of his face seemed stretched tight over his skull, parchment thin and gray. His lips were pulled back in a rictus that wasn't quite a smile, revealing teeth that looked too long, too sharp. And behind him, filling the cramped bathroom, wasn't the tiled wall. It was depth, an infinite, lightless void. Within that void, shapes moved vast, indistinct, and utterly alien. Geometries that defied understanding shifted and pulsed, and eyes, millions of lidless, unblinking eyes, reflecting the weak bulb light with a cold, hungry intelligence. They focused on his reflection, on him. The whispers ceased. A profound, crushing silence descended, heavier than any sound. The cold wasn't just cold anymore. It was the absolute zero of interstellar void, leaching the warmth, the life, the very substance from his core. He felt a terrifying hollowness blooming inside his chest, spreading like ice through his veins. not pain, but an awful, expanding absence. He was being unmade, emptied, hollowed. He couldn't scream. His throat was frozen dust. He couldn't look away from the abyss in the mirror, from the thing his reflection had become. The eyes in the void behind it held him, pinning him in place with the weight of eons. He understood, with a clarity that was the final, devastating blow, that Martha was wrong. Old man Harper hadn't been found down by the creek. He was still here, in the walls, in the cold, in the hungry silence. Part of it, part of the pattern. The light bulb above him flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness absolute swallowed the bathroom. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Alex remained standing before the mirror, a statue of ice and dread. The only sound was the frantic, useless hammering of his own heart, a fading echo in the hollowing dark. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, a patient shroud. Inside, the ancient presence settled deeper, satisfied. It had found its canvas. The hollowing continued. It always continued, and the woods held its secret, tight and silent, under the watchful gaze of the Blackwood pines. Story 5. The silence in the old Hemlock farmhouse wasn't peaceful. It was the thick, heavy quiet of a tomb sealed for centuries. For Silas Thorne, it was supposed to be a refuge, a place to finally finish his novel, away from the city's clamor and the distractions of his crumbling marriage. The house, inherited from a reclusive great-uncle he barely remembered, stood alone on 40 acres of neglected New England woodland, brooding under perpetually gray skies. It smelled of damp earth, dust, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood soaked deep into the floorboards. The first oddity was easy to dismiss. Silas would place his pen on the desk, by the grimy window overlooking the skeletal birch grove, only to find it minutes later on the mantelpiece, or his mug of coffee, still steaming, would be inexplicably cold when he lifted it to his lips. Annoying, yes, but attributable to fatigue. The unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old structure, or perhaps a trick of the perpetually dim light filtering through the grimy panes. Then came the sounds, not loud, intrusive noises, but subtle ones that wormed their way into his concentration. A soft scritch-scratch inside the walls, like dry twigs scraping plaster. He blamed squirrels. A faint, rhythmic drip-drip from the attic, even during bone-dry weeks. A leak he'd have to investigate later. The worst was the whispering, not words exactly, more like the susurration of dead leaves skittering across stone, or the distant sighing of wind through a crack he couldn't locate. It seemed to come from the very corners of the rooms, fading the moment he turned his head to listen one rainy Tuesday. The power flickered and died, plunging the house into near-total darkness long before sunset. Silas fumbled for candles as the match flared, casting monstrous, leaping shadows on the water-stained wallpaper. He saw it, for less than a heartbeat, reflected in the black window pane. A shape standing behind his chair, taller than a man, impossibly thin, its outline blurred and shifting, like smoke given form. He spun around, heart hammering against his ribs, candle held aloft. Nothing, just the empty study, the dancing shadows, and the oppressive silence pressing in that night. The cold began. It wasn't the chill of an unheated house. It was a localized, invasive cold. A patch of floor near the fireplace would feel like ice under his bare feet. A chair would radiate Arctic air. Standing near the cellar door felt like leaning against a glacier. He started wearing sweaters indoors, constantly rubbing his arms. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, sometimes resolving into fragmented syllables that sounded ancient and guttural. K-thaw-y-g-n-t-h-v hog. They echoed in his skull long after the actual sound ceased. Sleep became a battleground. He de-wake gasping, convinced something heavy was sitting on his chest, its weight immense and suffocating. The air in his bedroom would feel thick, viscous, tasting faintly of ozone and decay. Vivid, nonsensical nightmares plagued him, visions of cyclopean ruins under a bloated, alien moon, and a vast, shapeless darkness writhing beneath the surface of reality. Hungering, he de-waked to find deep, crescent-shaped bruises on his arms, as if gripped by impossibly strong fingers. He found the journal in the attic, tucked beneath a loose floorboard near the chimney stack. It belonged to his great-uncle, Elias Hemlock. The entries started normally enough: weather observations, crop yields, minor repairs. Then the tone shifted. Elias wrote of the sleeper beneath the stone, of the weight in the walls, and the whispers from below. He described the same creeping cold, the misplaced objects, the oppressive dread. His handwriting grew increasingly frantic, degenerating into near illegible scrawls. It knows I am here. It tastes my fear. The cellar god help me. It is strongest near the cellar. The old root cellar, the one Pa built over. It wasn't just a root cellar. Found the stones underneath older than anything carved with things that hurt to look at, things that squirm in your mind. It sleeps, but it dreams, and its dreams leak out. It wants out. It needs shape, substance. It is trying to make itself real. Saw it last night. Not a shadow, flesh, or something like it. pale, too many joints, eyes like pits of tar, smiled at me, teeth like shards of bone. It learning. The cold isn't cold. It the absence. It drawing the heat, the life into itself. Can feel it pulling, like roots in my marrow. The final entry was a single sentence, scratched so deep it tore the paper. It in the walls. It in the stones. It in the dark behind my eyes. There's no leaving. Sela's blood turned to ice water. The root cellar. He remembered the heavy, iron-bound door off the main cellar, always locked. Elias's father had cemented over it, according to local lore, after some unspecified tragedy. Sela's had never paid it much mind. Now, the thought of it filled him with primal terror. The manifestations escalated with terrifying speed. Objects flew across rooms with violent force. Dishes shattered in the cupboards. Deep, gouging scratches appeared overnight on the inside of the front door, as if something frantic was trying to claw its way in. The whispering became a constant, guttural chanting, seeming to emanate from the very plaster. The localized cold spots intensified, radiating a deep, aching numbness that made his fingers clumsy and his thoughts sluggish. Food tasted like ash. Water from the tap carried a faint, coppery tang one afternoon. While trying to write, he glanced at the window. His reflection stared back, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Then, slowly, horrifyingly, the reflection winked at him with an eye that wasn't his own, an eye that was entirely black, devoid of white or iris, and glistening with unnatural moisture. He stumbled back, knocking over his chair. When he looked again, his own terrified face stared back. He tried to leave. He packed a single bag, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He reached the front door, grasped the icy cold handle. It wouldn't turn. He threw his shoulder against the solid oak. It didn't budge. He ran to a window, fumbling with the latch. It was sealed shut, painted over decades ago. He grabbed a heavy candlestick and swung it at the glass. It bounced off with a dull thud, leaving not even a scratch. Panic seized him. He tried window after window, door after door. All were immovable, as if fused into the structure of the house itself. The whispering rose to a crescendo, a chorus of alien voices laughing, mocking his efforts. No leaving belongs to the sleeper. The cellar door was open. It hadn't been earlier. The heavy wooden door leading down into the pitch-black undercroft stood ajar, revealing the top of the steep, rickety stairs. A wave of frigid, damp air, thick with the smell of wet stone, and that underlying metallic rot, wafted up. The chanting seemed loudest here, vibrating up from the depths he knew he shouldn't go down. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything but descend into that darkness. But Elias's journal, the cemented over root cellar, the source, understanding, cold and absolute, settled over him like a shroud. Escape was impossible. The house was its domain, its prison, and now his. The entity wasn't just in the house, it was the house. And it was hungry. To understand, even fleetingly, might be the only shred of agency left, taking a guttering candle from a sconce, its flame dancing wildly in the cold draft, Silas stepped onto the top stair. The wood groaned ominously under his weight. The darkness below was absolute, swallowing the candlelight mere feet down. The chanting resolved into a single, guttural word, repeated over and over, echoing up the stone walls. Flesh, 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 he descended. Each step was agony, the cold biting deep into his bones, the air growing thicker, harder to breathe. The candlelight revealed damp, moss-slicked stone walls. At the bottom, the main cellar was a cavern of shadows, filled with the detritus of decades' broken furniture, forgotten tools, cobwebs thick as shrouds. The cold was intense here, a physical pressure. His breath plumed thickly in the air. The candle flame shrinking to a desperate blue bead end. There it was, in the far wall, where Elias S. journal mentioned the cement. It was cracked. Not just cracked, but bulging, as if immense pressure was pushing from behind. The cement was spiderwebbed with fissures, and from those cracks seeped not water, but a thick, viscous black ichor that gleamed faintly in the weak light. It dripped slowly, deliberately, onto the earthen floor, forming a small, glistening pool that seemed to absorb the light, but worse than the ichor was the shape pushing against the fractured cement. It wasn't distinct, not entirely. It was a suggestion of something vast and malformed pressing against the barrier from the other side. A curve that might be a shoulder, a ridge that could be a spine with too many vertebrae, a deep indentation like an eye socket, the size of a dinner plate. The stone itself seemed to throb faintly, in time with the chanting that now vibrated through Silas S. Very teeth he realized the truth. A revelation that shattered his sanity. Elias S. father hadn't he cemented over a root cellar. He de-entombed something that had been there long before the house, long before humans walked these woods, something that slept, but dreamed with a malevolence that seeped through the stones, the misplaced objects, the cold, the whispers, the reflections. They weren't attacks. They were explorations. The sleeper was testing the limits of its prison, probing the substance of the world above with tendrils of its dreaming mind, learning how to manipulate matter, energy, perception. It was learning how to become real within the confines of its cage. And Silas wasn't he just trapped. He was an experiment, a focus, a conduit. His fear, his life force, his very presence was feeding it, strengthening its grasp on this side of the barrier. The chanting stopped. An even deeper silence fell, profound and terrible. The dripping ichor ceased. The bulging shape behind the cracked cement went utterly still. The candle flame guttered, threatening to die then. The stone moved. Not much, just just a slight shift, a grinding sound like continents colliding deep underground. A new crack splintered upwards from the pool of ichor, wider than the others. From that impenetrable blackness within the wall, Silas felt it. Not a sound, not a sight, but a presence turning its full, awful attention upon him. It was ancient, vast beyond comprehension, and utterly devoid of anything resembling mercy or reason. It was hunger incarnate, wrapped in the cold void, between stars the candle flames snuffed out, plunging him into absolute, suffocating darkness. The cold intensified, searing his lungs. In that consuming blackness, Silas Thorne understood the final, horrifying truth Elias had scratched into his journal. Escape wasn't impossible because the doors were locked. Escape was impossible because there was no outside anymore. The entity wasn't just in the cellar or the walls. Its influence, its cold, whispering essence, had seeped into the very land, the air, the boundaries of reality around the Hemlock farm. The house was the epicenter, but the cage was larger than he ever imagined. He was inside it with the sleeper and in the perfect, utter black. Something wet and impossibly cold brushed against his cheek. A sound began, not a whisper, but a low, resonant thrumming that vibrated up from the earth through his bones. A sound felt more than heard, the sound of something vast and slumbering beginning to wake. The sleeper had found its focus. The experiment was entering its final phase. Silas opened his mouth to scream, but the freezing dark rushed in, filling him, silencing him forever. Above, in the silent, watching house, thousands of unseen eyes slowly blinked open in the walls. Story 6. The silence of Hemlock cabin wasn't peaceful. It was hungry. That was the first thing Silas Thorne noticed when he arrived. Lugging his typewriter and a duffel bag of provisions up the uneven stone path, he rented the remote. Timber-framed cabin nestled deep within the Adirondacks for a month. Seeking the profound quiet necessary to finish his long-stalled novel. No internet, no phone signal, just the whispering pines and the cold, clear lake reflecting the bruised twilight sky. Perfect the key turned with a reluctant scrape in the heavy oak door. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of ancient dust, pine resin, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood or wet iron. The single large room was dominated by a fieldstone fireplace, cold and dark. Dust motes danced in the slivers of dying light, slicing through the grimy windows. It was exactly as advertised. Isolated, rustic, slightly neglected. Perfect Silas settled in. He built a fire. chased away the worst of the chill, and unpacked, the first night passed uneventfully, filled only with the crackle of the fire and the distant cry of a loon. Yet sleep was elusive. He kept waking, convinced he heard a sound, not an animal sound, but a low, resonant thrum, like the deepest note of a cello played underwater. It seemed to vibrate up through the floorboards and into his bones. He dismissed it as the settling of old wood, or the wind, finding a crack. The unease started subtly on the second day, while attempting to write at the heavy oak table near the window. Silas felt a sudden, intense chill. It wasn't the ambient cold. It was a localized pocket of frigid air that wrapped around his left hand, making his fingers stiffen on the keys. He rubbed his hands together, blowing warm air onto them, and the chill vanished as abruptly as it came. Odd, but plausible. Drafty cabin later. While fetching water from the ice-cold pump outside, he glanced back at the cabin for a fraction of a second. The windows seemed impossibly dark, like voids punched into the wood, and the angles of the roof appeared subtly wrong, warped, as if the structure was leaning into a dimension he couldn't perceive. He blinked, and the illusion was gone. Trick of the fading light, he told himself. Mountain air, playing tricks. The manifestations escalated. Objects began migrating. His favorite pen, left beside the typewriter, would be found on the dusty mantelpiece. A tin of beans rolled off the kitchen shelf with no apparent cause. He waked to find the rocking chair by the hearth gently swaying, though no breeze stirred the heavy curtains. The thrumming returned nightly, deeper, more insistent, vibrating the bed frame. It was accompanied now by a faint, high-pitched whine, just on the edge of hearing, that set his teeth on edge and made his skull ache. Silas tried to rationalize. Cabin fever setting in early. Carbon monoxide. He checked the ancient propane heater meticulously. It seemed sound. The isolation was getting to him. He decided he needed to push through. He forced himself to write. The clack of the typewriter, keys a desperate counter-rhythm. To the unsettling silence that pressed in around him then came the whispers. Not voices, exactly. More like the susurration of dry leaves skittering across stone, or the sigh of air through a long-forgotten tunnel. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, particularly near the massive fireplace. He strained to catch words, but they dissolved into meaningless sound before he could grasp them. They spoke of vast, cold spaces, of crushing weight, of time measured in epochs, not minutes. The air near the hearth grew perpetually cold. A pocket of winter that defied the warmth of the fire. He now kept burning constantly, The stones themselves sometimes seemed to shift, their surfaces momentarily slick and dark, like wet basalt, before reverting to rough granite one afternoon. Seeking respite, Silas walked down to the lake. The water was unnaturally still, a perfect mirror reflecting the oppressive gray sky and the dense wall of pines. As he stood on the pebbled shore, he saw it, reflected in the water. The cabin wasn't there. Where it should have been was only a towering, jagged formation of black rock, slick and featureless, like an obsidian shard driven into the earth. He whipped around. The cabin stood solidly behind him, weathered wood and stone. He looked back at the water. The reflection showed only the black monolith. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. He stumbled back to the cabin. The feeling of being watched from the surrounding woods overwhelming that night. The dread solidified. The fire in the hearth, usually a comforting blaze, guttered low despite fresh logs. The flames didn't dance, they crawled, sluggish and dark, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe independently on the walls. The whispering intensified, coalescing into a single, guttural resonance that filled the room. It wasn't a language Silas knew, but its meaning seeped into his mind like poison. Below, waiting, hungry, he tried to leave. He grabbed his keys, threw open the heavy oak door, and lunged into the night. Instead of the clearing and the path to his car, he faced only impenetrable darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a tangible, viscous wall of blackness that pressed against the threshold, cold and smelling of ozone and deep earth. He reached out a trembling hand. The darkness yielded slightly, like cold jelly, but offered no passage. Panic clawed at his throat. He slammed the door shut, locking it, leaning his back against it, heart hammering against his ribs. Escape was impossible. The cabin wasn't a refuge. It was a cage, or an altar. The entity made its presence known more overtly now. The thrumming became a constant physical pressure, a subsonic drone that vibrated his internal organs. The high whine escalated into a psychic shriek that scraped raw against his thoughts. Shapes moved at the periphery of his vision, not human shapes, but impossible angles and shifting masses of shadow that defied geometry. They coalesced near the fireplace. Drawn to the cold spot, he noticed the wood grain on the table. It wasn't static. The lines writhed slowly, sinuously, like dark worms burrowing beneath the surface. When he touched it, the wood felt unnaturally cold and slightly yielding, like skin over rotten fruit. The stones of the hearth pulsed with a faint, sickly light, a deep, bruised purple that that seemed to leach the color from the room. The whispers were constant now. A chorus of alien voices speaking of descent, of ancient slumber disturbed, of the fragile barrier between worlds wearing thin. Here, they seem to say, we are here, beneath you. Silas understood, with a chilling certainty that bypassed reason, what the cabin was. It wasn't built on the land. It was built over something. A seal, a lock, a wound in the fabric of reality, plugged by timber and stone and human ignorance, and his presence, his desperate need for quiet solitude, his very humanity, was weakening that seal. He was the key turning in a lock. He never knew existed the final descent began with the walls. They started to breathe, subtly at first, a slow expansion and contraction, like the flanks of some immense, slumbering beast. The air grew thick and heavy, tasting of ozone and decay. The temperature plummeted, his breath pluming white despite the feeble fire. The whispers coalesced into a single, commanding voice, a sound like grinding boulders that resonated inside his skull. Open it wasn't a request. It was an imperative etched into his very being. He felt an irresistible pull towards the fireplace. The cold spot had expanded, engulfing the entire hearth. The stones were no longer stone. They were black, glassy, and wet. Like the rock in the lake's reflection, they pulsed with that same deep purple light, which now cast no shadows, but instead seemed to absorb the light from the room, creating pockets of absolute void. He fought it, teeth chattering, muscles screaming in protest, but the voice was inside him now, vibrating his bones, commanding his nerves. His legs moved without his consent, step by agonizing step. He approached the pulsating black maw of the hearth. The air crackled with static, raising the hairs on his arms. The thrumming was a physical force now, shaking the cabin to its foundations. Dust rained from the ceiling beams. The typewriter clattered to the floor. He stood before the hearth. The blackness within wasn't empty. It seethed. Shapes moved in the impossible depths, colossal, segmented things glimpsed in flashes of sickly purple light. Things with too many limbs, or limbs in the wrong places. Things whose very forms mocked geometry and sanity, an overwhelming sense of age and malice radiated from the opening, a psychic miasma of hunger that had waited millennia. This wasn't a creature. It was a place, an ancient, sentient darkness, a piece of the void that predated stars, and it was waking up. The grinding voice boomed again, shaking the timbers. The door his gaze was drawn not to the seething darkness, but to the heavy oak door he slammed shut. It looked different. The wood seemed darker, denser. the iron banding thicker, more primitive. The keyhole wasn't just a hole. It was a complex, spiraling pattern etched into the wood itself. He understood with horrifying clarity. The cabin door wasn't wood. It was part of the seal, and his presence, his fear, his life force was the mechanism needed to open it from this side. The entity couldn't breach the seal directly. It needed a conduit, a key shaped from flesh, and Terra the compulsion shifted. He wasn't drawn towards the hearth anymore. He was drawn towards the door. He stumbled towards it, his hand outstretched, not towards the knob, but towards the spiraling pattern around the keyhole. It pulsed with the same deep purple light as the hearthstones. The wood felt icy and strangely pliant, like frozen flesh. The whispers roared in his head, a cacophony of alien anticipation as his fingertips touched the spiraling design. A jolt of pure, freezing agony shot up his arm. He tried to scream, but his throat was locked. The wood flowed. It crawled up his fingers, over his hand. A creeping tide of darkness that felt like liquid ice and burning acid simultaneously. It wasn't consuming him. It was integrating him. He felt his bones shifting, his flesh merging with the grain of the ancient oak. His vision tunneled, the cabin dissolving into swirling patterns of impossible geometry and seething purple-black light. The grinding voice wasn't external anymore. It vibrated from within his own ossifying chest. We open the last thing Sila's thorn comprehended before his consciousness dissolved into the cold, ancient hunger of the thing beneath the cabin. Was the horrifying truth. He hadn't been trapped inside. He had become the lock, and now he was becoming the door. The heavy oak plank groaned, not on its hinges, but from within, as the spiraling pattern flared with blinding purple light. The wood stretched, distorted, and began to bulge outwards, forming a crude, screaming silhouette pressed against the inside surface. Fingertips of dark, grained wood strained against the iron banding from within the plank itself. Outside, the viscous wall of darkness shivered. The seal was breaking. The thing beneath the world, patient for eons, finally felt the barrier yield. It gathered its impossible bulk, ready to push through the newly formed aperture, the doorway that had once been a man. The silence of the Adirondacks deepened, not into peace, but into the awful, anticipatory hush before the birth scream of an ancient, ravening dark. The door was almost open.